Hong Kong and from Tokyo to everybody joining us today, wherever you are, whether you're there in the morning, afternoon or evening. I do hope you're all safe and well. My name is Charles Goddard. I'm the editorial director at The Economist Group, and I'm also the executive director of the World Ocean Summit and the World Ocean Initiative. And I just want to offer my very, very warm thanks for everybody who's joining us today, for taking the time to do so, to our distinguished speakers and to our many listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the first webinar in the Blue Recovery Series, and this series picks up from our discussions in the World Ocean Summit Insight Hour around the impact of COVID-19 on the ocean and on the building of a sustainable ocean economy. And it expands, it seeks to expand on the recovery theme. As if any of us need reminding, of course, the coronavirus has seriously impacted many, many sectors in the ocean economy. And its effect on the ocean economy has been quite profound. And relevantly, particularly to this region, around 10% of the world's fisheries, 10% of the world's population, of course, rely on fisheries, many of those people in this region for their livelihoods. But because of the disruptions around COVID, particularly to supply chains, often many of those people cannot bring their fish to market. And we'll be hearing later from the Minister for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia around some of those impacts and how they're going to be managing them. Shipping too, and of course shipping, we have the advantage in one way of having a reduction in emissions from shipping as a result of the reduction in cargo and trade that's been going on around the world. But of course shipping itself is experiencing a new kind of crisis beyond trade itself and the volume of trade that's going on. And that is to do with seafarers that have been effectively locked up, semi-imprisoned in their own ships as a result of not being able to get back to their home countries because of the pandemic. And we'll be hearing a little bit later too from the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, how some of these challenges are playing out, and indeed what the opportunities are to make a transition to inclusive, as the wording now seems to be, inclusive and green shipping out of the crisis. Again, relevant to the region, up to 40% of the GDP of some of the small island developing states has been impacted, in particular from the drop in fisheries activities, but most importantly, I think, from the drop in tourism activities, which almost entirely have come to a halt. And we will be hearing very shortly from President Tommy Remengesau from Palau, how the Republic of Palau is coping and planning their recovery around this. So 2020 has been a very difficult year for us all, and indeed it was meant to be an ocean super year, as we all know. The first set of targets around SDG 14, Sustainable Development Goal, on the ocean were meant to be coming due in 2020, and we know already that the fisheries subsidies that were being negotiated at the WTO, we know that those are going to be delayed. We know that many ocean events, including the UN Ocean Conference, has had to be delayed until next year. Indeed, our own event, the World Ocean Summit, which was to be held in Tokyo, of course, has been cancelled. I'm happy to say, I'm very happy to say that in 2021, we will be resuming full activity on the World Ocean Summit, and that will be in Portugal, in Lisbon, we hope, and we look forward to inviting all of you to that next Ocean Summit, our 8th Ocean Summit in Lisbon. I think it's important, just a couple of points to say. Undeniably, it seems to me that the progress that we were hoping to make in 2020 towards a sustainable ocean economy has slowed, without any question of doubt. And undeniably, the focus that countries were beginning to have on the long term opportunities, the long-term investments that we're needing to make in the sustainable ocean economy have now be dissipated to some degree, at least, because of the need for those countries to focus really on the short-term issues that they're facing as a result, the measures that they need to take in order to shore up their economies, to ensure that people have incomes, and to make sure that we have some sort of recovery path and management path through the economic and social impacts of COVID and of the pandemic. So the recovery, I think, from for the ocean economy, indeed the blue recovery, is not going to be straightforward. But I think encouragingly, the momentum that we're beginning to see building across the world to build back in a blue, or in a bluer way, build back bluer, build back better, as the United Nations Secretary General said, and to accelerate the blue and the green transition. In Europe, of course, we have the Green Deal. In America, the Democrats are now talking about a green transition. And I hope here in Asia, we're going to talk in this session a little bit about how we see the ocean potentially playing a role in the sustainable future and in helping to build a more sustainable transition. We're going to be looking at everything from fisheries, sustainable fisheries, how that transition is working, building on renewables. Vietnam, ocean renewables, Vietnam is doing some very interesting work around that, the decarbonization of shipping and the greening of ports. Sustainable tourism, how do we move more quickly towards more sustainable tourism? How do we balance ecotourism and indeed mass tourism in the region? And how do we build the science and the data that helps us do much of these things, help policymakers do much of these things in an intelligent and informed way? All of these, I hope, we're going to explore during the Blue Recovery series, and some of which we'll be looking at today. So finally, before we begin, let me just offer my very warm thanks to and appreciation to the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Saskatchewan Peace Foundation and to the Nippon Foundation for their sponsorship of these series, and of course for helping us get this off the ground, this series off the ground. And as always, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Atsushi Tsunami, who is the president of the Ocean Policy Research Institute and the Saskatchewan Peace Foundation, to make a few opening remarks before we actually begin the session. Dr. Atsushi, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. Excellency President Remy Gesso, Chairman Saskatchewan, Minister Palau, Executive Secretary Aris Jabana, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and good morning. As the president of the Saskatchewan Peace Foundation and on behalf of the Ocean Policy Research Institute, I would like to welcome you all to the webinar Blue Recovery Series, and this first webinar ensuring a robust blue recovery in Asia and Pacific. I hope that you are safe and well in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I express my condolence to those who lost beloved ones to COVID-19 and appreciation to those who struggle to protect us and support our lives despite the unprecedented difficulties. Given all these backdrops at our today's webinar, we will address very important subjects, and we are delighted to have you all, and thank you indeed for joining us. We have scheduled this webinar to commemorate our Japan's National Day of Ocean today, and I thank the Nippon Foundation and Economist Group to co-organize this webinar series. We had a plan to hold the, as Charles mentioned, the Economist World Ocean Summit in Tokyo last March, early this year. We also had a plan to host a series of related meetings back-to-back to the summit. We are supposed to have an actually opening day of the Tokyo Olympics tomorrow. All plans have been changed due to the outbreak, as we talked about today. I understand that Palau is one of the countries that haven't had any the case of the pandemic at the moment. Nonetheless, Japan and other countries have suffered significantly the socio-economic damages due to the suspension and disruption of travels and supply chains. At this webinar, we will try to address how the ocean-based economy or blue economy can trigger socio-economic recovery. We termed it as blue recovery, and we try to address this throughout our webinar series. Coronavirus is not only one threat that to our ocean and livelihood. We lost over 70 people in the latest heavy rainstorms in Kyushu, Japan, early this month. Japan has been experiencing unprecedented heavy rains every year and lose people's lives. Increased rainstorms and typhoons attribute at the seawater temperature increase and climate change. Marine plastics, fishery resource depletion, and IUU fishing are others that threaten our ocean, to name a few. We have mounting challenges to tackle. We cannot go back to the same place after COVID-19. We need to live in a new normal life. To do so, we need transformation, innovation, cooperation, and partnership. We have to advance and aggregate our wisdom and compassion to conserve and sustainably use our ocean for our present and future generations. And I hope that this webinar will serve you as a useful platform for us to exchange ideas and promote dialogues and fill the gap of this stalled policy dialogues and enable us to advance our work for the forthcoming important summits and conferences towards achieving a sustainable ocean. Once again, thank you all for your support and partnership. I look forward to the lively discussions at this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atsushi. Wise remarks. And as you say, we cannot go back to business as usual. I suppose the risk is that we do. And we have to see how we can prevent that. So with that, let's move to our first session with two very distinguished keynote speakers, President Tomi Ramengesau of the Republic of Palau, and Yohei Sasakawa, Chairman of the Nippon Foundation. Neither of these people really need introductions, I know, but let me just say that both have been really extraordinary champions of the health and long-term sustainability of the ocean and the ocean economy. Mr. Sasakawa, can I begin with you, and can I begin by inviting you to share your thoughts on the state of the ocean and how the Nippon Foundation has been responding to that challenge and also to the challenge of COVID?
Thank you for your kind introduction, Mr. Goddard. It is an honor for me to be a part of this first session of the Blue Recovery series, jointly sponsored by The Economist, the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and the Nippon Foundation on this National Marine Day of Japan. I'd like to express my gratitude to my friend, His Excellency President Tomi Ramengesau, for his attendance. I'd also like to express my deepest condolences to those who have lost their lives in the COVID-19 pandemic and convey my sincere respect to the medical professionals who continue to fight on the front line on the global pandemic. To answer your question, I must say that the world is facing a grave threat to its survival today. I say this, not with the COVID-19 pandemic in mind. I say this because Mother Ocean that supports all life on planet Earth is trapped in a very grave state of affairs due to man's unruly use of the ocean. We have always taken it for granted the existence of the ocean over the thousands of millennia, while never looking back to the few decades that we have heavily burdened the ocean due to economic modernization. I would like to refer to the special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate issued at the IPCC 51st General Assembly last September in Monaco. According to the report, phenomena thought to exceed the tipping point are already beginning to appear in certain marine ecosystems. The report is sounding the alarm that the oceans, and by extension the entire planet, are in a dire situation, and that choices made now are critical for the future. This is a matter of life and death, especially for small island nations and the Arctic that are first to be impacted: global warming and ocean acidification, depletion of fishing resources, and millions of tons of plastic debris are threatening our oceans. Open your ears and you can already hear the silent cry of agony from Mother Ocean. Therefore, we must come to terms with the ocean by addressing its plight as an ultra long-term challenge of 1,000 years, left unattended in time. It will have a profound impact on the very survival of humankind. We, the Nippon Foundation, have long grappled with this crisis. Based on our founding principles, one world, one family, our activities cut across politics, philosophy, religion, ethnicity, and national borders. Japan in particular as an island nation, has always depended on the ocean for our survival. Ever since the establishment of our foundation, we have focused on the ocean that has bestowed upon us, Japanese and the people of the world, so much benefit. We had already predicted 30 years ago of what we are seeing today and felt a strong sense of crisis approaching the ocean. We realized that Japan must become a nation that is protected by the ocean, to a nation that protects the oceans around the world. Therefore, with an ever-increasing sense of crisis, we placed a strong emphasis on our ocean-related initiatives. These initiatives have spanned over multiple areas, such as education of over 1,400 ocean experts in 150 countries. The safe navigation through the Malacca-Singapore Strait, the support of the Pacific Island nations, and the enactment of the National Basic Act on Ocean Policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sasakawa. Thank you very much for framing these very real human-induced problems and issues that the ocean faces and the risks that we bring to ourselves as a global community around them. Can I just ask you briefly, you mentioned that you were looking at solutions. What, in your view, should be the priorities for the future? How are we best going to tackle these priorities together?
The challenges facing our oceans are becoming more and more diverse and complex at a pace we have never imagined. I believe this is a clear sign that we are called for collective action across all sectors to reach a viable solution. One example would be the innovation of technology, such as digitalization of the ocean industry. It has a huge potential to make dramatic changes in the traditional logistics and fishing, navigation safety, ocean observation, information and communication, and security. Already in the private sector, this transition is gaining momentum. The development of new businesses is evolving at a fast pace under the new vision. I think we can say that a significant change is being forged in the world of the ocean. We are navigating into the age of new normal as we turn away from traditional top-down policy to achieve public-private collaboration. We are gradually seeing a growing global movement toward preserving the riches and blessings of the ocean and the fulfillment of a sustainable use of the ocean. However, unfortunately, I think there are still not many who see the ocean issue from the perspective of a threat to the survival of mankind. I believe it is absolutely necessary that the leaders of states and the businesses, as well as every member of the global community, take action, being fully aware of the prevailing threat. We have been able to hold this webinar because of the support from the economists to the Nippon Foundation's approach of looking ahead 1,000 years to address the issues of the ocean. It is my greatest expectation that there will be active, frank discussions on the subject of the sustainability of the ocean. We have the responsibility to pass on our ocean to humanity now and into the distant future. In order to fulfill this important task, let us think, act, and work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sasakawa, and thank you particularly for suggesting that our framing of a sustainable ocean is not really just for the next generation or next couple of generations, but for 1,000 years into the future. What we do now in and around the ocean, what we as a world does around the ocean affects all of our futures, or into the very distant future as well. I think that's something that perhaps we do forget. Looking at his own beautiful home and the island state of Palau, I'm sure that resonates. That time frame resonates with you, Mr. President, President Tommy Ramangasao, who I know whose ocean vision is equally as long, but whose time horizons might be, are very much shorter than 1,000 years, and given the problems that are faced by small island developing states such as Palau. Mr. President, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Can I just ask you to make some comments around the challenges that you're facing at the moment, and then we'll have a brief Q&A as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles Goddard, and it's really a good opportunity for me to be here with all of you today. Chairman Sasakawa, my good friend, and Excellencies, honorable guests, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I want to first begin by truly expressing my condolences at the great loss of lives associated with COVID-19 pandemic, as well as with the families with the recent floodings at Kyushu. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with the families affected. This devastation illustrates the reality of the threats that we face from extreme weather exacerbated by climate change. And today, Japan celebrates Ocean Day. But you do not need a specific day to celebrate the importance of the ocean. Because for Japan and the Japanese people, like for Palau, the ocean is part of your daily life, your economic prosperity, your history, your identity, your culture, and you celebrate it every day. But while we all celebrate the ocean, we also know about the crisis that our ocean faces, a crisis of overfishing, of warming waters, of bleaching reefs, a crisis that has not been paused by the pandemic. Indeed, the coronavirus pandemic is also bringing with it a pandemic pollution and plastics and plastic use. In Palau, fortunately, we have remained COVID-free so far, but we have not been immune to its effects, and like so many others, are facing an economic crisis. Visitors, including many thousands of Japanese every year, have not been able to travel to Palau to share in our pristine paradise. So we too are having to prepare and implement a recovery, and we must make the most of this opportunity to turn this recovery into a blue one. This, of course, depends on making investments now that supports sustainable futures, and the ocean is no exception to this. At the 7th Our Ocean Conference that Palau is hosting in December, we will put a spotlight on this blue recovery. We are inviting ocean stakeholders to come forward with actions that support the blue recovery. We invite stakeholders to follow the model of Chairman Sasakawa and the Nippon Foundation, who have long been leaders in acting now for the future of our ocean. Let me give you one example. 6 years ago at the Our Ocean Conference in Chile, I announced our plans to create the Palau National Marine Sanctuary, which has begun its implementation phase this year. But as a small country, the challenge of monitoring and enforcing our large ocean space against illegal and unreported fishing activity has always been daunting. The chairman and foundation recognized the ambition that we had to conserve our ocean. And so today, the sanctuary's implementation is supported by a Coast Guard ship, the Goddard, that was generously contributed by the foundation. This is an example of true partnerships for ocean action, one that addresses not just Palau's maritime security, but our ocean health, our food security, and our ocean economy as a whole. Our ability to host our ocean conference, additionally, has been supported by the foundation to upgrade our essential public infrastructure and venues, infrastructure that, of course, we will have benefits for Palau long before our Ocean 7 in itself. Chairman Sasakawa and the foundation, of course, have been an invaluable partner of Palau's sustainable development in so many other ways over the years. Scientific research and collaboration, capacity building for sustainable tourism, and inter-island transport, just to name a few. And we know that this partnership will continue long into the future because we have a shared vision and wealth of our ocean. Indeed, the next phase of the sanctuary also shows how a blue recovery can also strengthen our ocean economy. Our goal for the 20% of Palau's total exclusive economic zone beyond the sanctuary is to develop and support a domestic artisanal fishing industry, one that can improve local access to pelagic fish and support better nutrition and food security, as well as diversifying our economy beyond tourism. But investing in developing this industry will also require new partnerships. On this Ocean Day in Japan, I must also recognize the leadership of Prime Minister Abe, who is a member of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, which I co-chair with Norway. And after 2 years of work, the panel's main recommendations are nearing completion. They will set out ambitious actions that take us towards a healthy, productive, and resilient ocean, and that there is no ocean economy if it is not a sustainable ocean economy. Just last week, a report commissioned by the Ocean Panel found that investments in key ocean sectors, such as mangrove restoration and sustainable seafood, yield $5 of benefits for every dollar invested. We can and we need to take advantage of this through our blue recovery efforts to scale up actions and force new partnerships. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Mr. President, for those comments. Let me just come down a little bit around this question of the recovery. We have in Palau, obviously, much has been put at risk. Already there were great risks around the ocean, as you've already suggested, but the pandemic has put much of that at further risk. A loss of tourism in Palau, I think, as I understand it, has contributed to a 23% loss of revenue for the government, which has been a significant, 23% decline in GDP, which is very significant. Can I just ask you, this has been a cruel toll, the pandemic. You've got quite a number of plans, building out artisanal fisheries, managing the marine protected areas that you have, and rebuilding sustainable tourism against a backdrop of reduced funding and reduced revenue. How are you going to be able to build back blue under those circumstances?
Ultimately, our plan is to advance a resilient economy, one that strengthens our ability to withstand the future shocks. This is how we make our investments of today count and contribute to our longer-term sustainable development. So when it comes to the ocean, there are many opportunities for investment to support employment. The Ocean Panel commissioned report last week on the economic costs and benefits of a sustainable ocean economy points to some of this. And as I have mentioned, a dollar of investment can result in up to $5 of economic, environmental, and health benefits. Mangrove conservation, for instance, in particular, can deliver $88 of economic, environmental, and health benefit for every dollar of investment. But our revenue stream from tourism has been heavily hit during this pandemic. So small island countries like Palau need new partnerships to make these investments a reality. We need more groups like the Saskatchewan Foundation and other philanthropists, business and civil society to also partner with us to turn opportunity into action. For Palau, this strategy can include the next phase of the Palau National Marine Sanctuary that would support a domestic artisanal fishing industry that benefits from the part of our EEG that remains open to fishing. This next phase can involve investing in the supply chain that can sustain artisanal fishing, for instance, from cold storage to a local market to efficient fishing boats. Ocean-based tourism, of course, will remain a central part of our long-term strategy, but artisanal fishing can also be an important form of economic diversification and part of this blue economy.
Thank you. Let me just go back to your point about the expansion of protected areas and the management of those areas. I mean, obviously one of the challenges has been the drop in government revenue and the ability, I think, of the Palau government to manage to ensure that there's enough money being spent on ships going out to monitor and enforce regulations in the protected areas. How do you, I mean, it's a big problem, isn't it? I mean, because the areas that you have that are protected are enormous. How do you plan to try to shore that up, to ensure that you are continuing to be able to address the protection of the marine protected areas during this COVID problem and also beyond?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. It's very hard to not only continue to monitor and protect the protected area networks, but really to address the issue of climate change that is also a threat alongside the pandemic situation we're in. And so as we continue to move forward, we continue to stress the importance that, yes, the pandemic is a serious challenge facing us, but so is the impact and influence of climate change on the sustainability of our ocean objectives. You cannot talk about the ocean sustainability without addressing climate change. That is also a pandemic security issue. So we will continue to work with our partners. We will continue to seek philanthropy, civil society, to help us with research, as well as also with law enforcement, like we have been able to partner up with the Saskatchewan Peace Foundation. And we will continue to address this issue as we host the Our Ocean Conference in December of this year, to really continue to stress the fact that our long-term sustainability as island nations is not just about COVID-free, but also being able to focus on the challenges facing the ocean, which is our long-term sustainable solution.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a new way of describing climate change, the pandemic of climate change. I rather like that. It's a very good way of putting it, I think. Can I just ask you on that note? I mean, small island developing states and yourself, indeed, Palau, have been right at the forefront of driving an international consensus around climate change in the ocean. Of course, we've unfortunately had COP26 delayed until next year. And of course, the discussions at COP26 were going to, I hope, focus around some of the challenges that the ocean faces in relation to climate change, but B, particularly the solutions that the ocean could bring to climate change. Can I just ask you, how positive do you feel now that that there has been a delay. How positive do you feel about COP26 next year in the UK and the way in which ocean is being brought into the discussions around climate change?
Well, first of all, Charles, the challenge will continue to be in keeping focused really on climate change. And not only focusing, but keeping the momentum needed to address the issues of climate change. And that's why the high-level panel commissioned a report that actually found that the ocean could contribute up to 1/5 of the emissions reductions needed to meet the Paris Agreement target. So there is a lot of untapped potential there in areas such as renewable energy, blue carbon, and seafood. But we do need the partnerships to tap to this potential. One of the key areas of action at our Ocean Conference is on climate change. Most of the commitments made at last year's conference in Norway addressed the climate theme. And we hope this will continue this year, as well as getting into the next UN-sponsored Ocean Conference. Our Secretariat is ready to receive these commitments that can build new partnerships and inspire new actions, especially at this nexus of the ocean and climate. I keep worrying that the focus may not be where it should be at today, as we not only fight ourselves out of the pandemic virus, but in the years to come, especially as you have correctly stated from the beginning, everyone is really looking out for themselves first, which is to be expected. So many of these regional and international efforts are going to need the really strong, deep down commitments from the big partners, especially people who can make a difference, to continue to press on the issue, continue to provide the leadership needed, because the world is going to be in much jeopardy if we don't get the necessary leadership from those who can make things happen. I think I mentioned it slightly in the beginning, but in this pandemic, we're already seeing the growing challenge of pollution and plastic impact on the ocean, because there's a lot of use of plastic. And if we don't do something about it, it can only contribute to the issue. So I'm hopeful, but at the same time, I truly pray that the international will, the international leadership of those who can make a difference will be there as we will move forward.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed. I share your hope and I share your concern that somehow we're not going to be able to collaborate enough to be able to move forward as quickly as we need to. But I just want to wish you all the very best for our ocean in December. I know, as you set out already, your thoughts and plans for our ocean, the Our Ocean Conference, and we've been a big participant at that conference. We very much hope to be able to see you there, and also for the high-level panel, whose work I admire and whose term is coming to an end soon. Thank you, Mr. President, very much for joining us.
Thank you, Charles.
So let's move now to our panel discussions. Our panel discussion, our key with our distinguished guests. Let me introduce our distinguished guests. First, let me introduce Amida Salsaya Alisjabana. She is the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UN-ESCAP. We have also Edi Prabowo, Minister for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia. Tetsuhiko Kashimura, who is Managing Director of Refinverse, a Japanese waste material recycling venture. and Atsushi Tsunami, President of the Ocean Policy Research Institute and President of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Each will speak for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'll be able to then sort of seed a discussion and seed some questions with them. I do encourage you as our audience, as our listeners, to begin typing in your questions too, which I would like to be able to put to our panel of speakers, our distinguished panel of speakers. So do remember to do that, and we have a Q&A function that feeds me the questions, and I will pass on to our speakers. Let me, before we begin with our first speaker, the Executive Secretary, let me just ask for our polling question to be put up, please, our first polling question to be put up. If you could, Louise, just put that up. I cannot see the polling question at the moment. Let me come back to the polling question in a short while. Let's begin, shall we? Executive Secretary, if you're able to begin, I'll come back to the polling question afterwards. If I could ask you to begin with your comments, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Charles. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my pleasure to speak at this high-level thematic panel. I welcome the emphasis on ocean, as ocean and its resources are the lifeline of Asia Pacific. It is closely linked to the achievement of sustainable development, and yet the state of ocean health is fragile. COVID-19 pandemic and its ensuing Building Back Better recovery provides an opportunity to correct the current situation of us living an unhealthy life, so to speak, including as it relates to ocean and marine resources. Allow me to highlight 4 areas of focus in addressing the ocean and marine resources challenges. The first one is, let me share the importance of data, statistics, and ocean account. Data are available only for 2 of the 10 targets of SDG 14, that is life below water. So therefore, significant knowledge gaps remain. For example, in ocean acidification, fisheries and fishing-related activities, and on economic benefits to SIDS, small island developing states, and less developing countries. Ocean health is showing decline in both exclusive economic zones and the high seas. Ocean accounts are the logical measurement framework for sustainable ocean development plans, marine spatial planning, and blue ocean economies. They are needed to calculate, for example, the contribution of ocean-related sectors to the economy, to track whether investments are building ocean wealth for future generations. Why we need regional cooperation? It is because of insufficient methodology, limited country-level experience, and high costs in collecting data, especially across the economic exclusive zone. Countries that need the data most are also oftentimes those that have the least data. So therefore, regional collaboration is needed to support the national statistical system, to support and advance the development of ocean account and its use for decision-making. Second is on promoting sustainable maritime connectivity. Shipping has been the backbone of economic development in Asia and Pacific. And of course, Asia represents the largest portion of global seaborne trade. However, some sub-regions such as Pacific SIDS countries experience low level of connectivity due to its remoteness and lack of economies of scale. Maritime connectivity divides therefore impedes growth as it isolates the sub-region from global and regional maritime trade, not to mention the adverse effects of maritime shipping on the marine ecosystem, as well as issues related to maritime or shipping safety. Greater regional efforts are needed to close the maritime a connectivity gap. For example, implementing the global regulations such as IMO regulations will help countries achieve safe and sustainable maritime transport. But of course, their capacity for implementation differs. So therefore, the need for the support this capacity building. Systematic regional dialogue in which innovation and capacity building elements are offered among the stakeholders are therefore key. Third, advancing sustainable fisheries. As we know, Asia Pacific is the world's largest producer of fish. However, the percentage of stocked fish in an unsustainable manner has increased by more than threefold in the past, let's say, 4 decades. And we know the main threats to marine fisheries are overfishing, environmental degradation, including the IUU. So therefore, generating again this data is crucial on fish stock, combating the IUU fishing activities, conserving marine areas must remain a priority. And these are areas of cooperation at the regional level that needs to be further strengthened. And finally, the fourth is the urgency to tackle marine plastic and debris. And I think during this pandemic, this issue is increasing, not decreasing, whereas the other issue may be lessened, but this particular issue is increasing. Asia Pacific produces half of world's plastic by volume and consume about 40%. The mismanagement of plastic waste has led to plastic materials being ended up in the ocean. Circular economy concept offers an approach that minimizes resource use and prolongs resources that enter the economy. The solution needs change in several aspects, including change in social norm for consumer and producer to change their behavior. Also, it needs solution by providing investment and business opportunities for the alternatives to plastic. Regional cooperation can scale up the initiative further. Let me give you a good example in case, which is one of our project, which is Closing the Loop project on plastic waste in Asean cities. It is a project in partnership with the government of Japan following the G20 Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. And there are 2 elements in this project. The first one is cities in ASEAN use innovation and smart technology. First, to monitor access and sustainably manage the plastic waste. And second, then the solution, in which cities develop policy and investment strategies to apply circular economy approaches in managing plastic. So recognizing the above challenges and opportunities, in May of this year, ESCAP, as a regional commission, our member states agreed, endorsed a resolution which mandates ESCAP in partnership with all stakeholders concerned to advance further this agenda, this regional cooperation in promoting the conservation and sustainable use of oceans, seas, and marine resources. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. Thank you for laying out the, I suppose, priorities that you've identified in your recent report, many of which I would strongly agree with. I think the data one is a really, really difficult one. I think in Asia there is a very poor data set for policymakers to be able to make the right decisions around the ocean, and somehow that needs to be improved. Can I just go back briefly to this question of the blue recovery and building back bluer, building back better, which the United Nations Secretary General has been, very, very interested in trying to promote, particularly around the ocean, because I know he's very, very focused around the ocean as well. I mean, one of my observations, and I lived in Asia a long time, is that the Build Back Better idea is gaining quite a lot of traction in Europe and to some degree America, but I haven't really heard a great deal of that in Asia. I've heard some of it, but am I wrong in suggesting that the Build Back Better, the Build Back Bluer movement in Asia is a little bit behind schedule, and what elements of regional cooperation can really be brought to bear to accelerate this?
Thank you very much for your question. Actually not, Again, I would like to echo what President Tommy Remengesau alluded earlier. So to build back better, one element is related to climate change. Of course, we saw a slight decrease in this CO2 emission, but that is temporary. That is temporary in nature, and we cannot rely to combat climate change by just only this transitory drop in CO2 emissions. So therefore, we need to do more. So and then this climate change certainly impacted, huge impact on ocean, including the increase in sea level rise, and then also the ocean acidification and so on. So therefore, I think one of the key is combating climate change. As you know, Asia Pacific contributes about 50% CO2 emissions. So therefore, any solution to climate change has to come from Asia Pacific. And not only the commitment, but there is this, some optimism. Why? Because again, in terms of technology, if you look at the countries in the region, the leaders in technology, in all technology, digital technology, including renewables and so on, are in the region. So therefore, we have to turn the corner, and I think several countries have started to do that, which is a good start. But we need to do more. So therefore, this regional or sub-regional cooperation is also the key. Because no country can do it alone. We need the commitment, we need the best practice, we need the lessons learned, we need the cooperation. So that is the direction I think the region is moving. Maybe because of pandemic, this a little bit, coming to not yet to the fore, but we are in that direction. Over.
Thank you. And just briefly, which regional organizations do you see as being most effective for bringing the ocean discussion to life, and particularly, as you suggested, the climate change and ocean discussion to life?
Yes, certainly. We've been working very closely with two sub-regions, which is ASEAN, and as well as the Pacific. Of course, Pacific are the leaders, in this regard. And then the example that I alluded earlier on this, marine plastic debris initiative in ASEAN cities, and scaling up for the solution using technology, first monitoring, mapping, and so on. So we know, the source, the particular cities, particular rivers, and so on. And then second is the solution. The solution part maybe is harder, because it requires change in behavior. Change in behavior requires also, ideally, change in social norm. If people understand, okay, dumping plastic, garbage waste and so on to rivers is bad, you cannot do it, then people change in lifestyle, healthy lifestyle. So the consumption side, we need also to build that, commitment and understanding. Over.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. I could ask you many, many more questions, but I think I must move on to Minister Prabowo, and we may be able to come back, I hope, to one or two of those questions. Could I, Minister Prabowo, ask you to just make a few comments, and we'll have a brief discussion after that. Mr. Prabowo, over to you. Minister? I think you may be on mute, Minister. Minister, I still believe you may be on mute. Shall we come back? Can I ask our team to see if they can help sort that out? Let's come back to the Minister, and let's go straight forward, shall we, to Kashimura-san, who I introduced earlier. Kashimura-san is the managing director of Refinverse, a Japanese waste material recycling venture. Keshimura-san, can I just ask you to make some comments, and then we'll reflect on those afterwards. Thank you.
Yes.
ごめんなさい。今日日本語での説明となることをお許しください。リファインバースの柏村です。本日は日本でさまざまな廃プラスチック製品のリサイクルをしている民間企業として、このディスカッションに参加させていただいています。こういった場で我々の取り組みや課題を共有させていただく機会を頂戴したことを大変感謝しています。我々の会社なんですけれども、本業というかですね、例えばオフィスや住宅に敷かれているカーペットタイル、本当に住宅なんかに見られるカーペットがあるかと思いますけど、そういったものであったり、自動車で使われるエアバッグですね、クッションのようなエアバッグ、そういったものをさまざまなプラスチック製品のリサイクルに取り組んでいる会社です。で、一例としてですね、オフィスに敷かれているようなカーペットに関しては、今、日本の国内で年間約2万トン、もう本当に廃棄されているカーペットを回収してきて、我々の独自技術で、もう一度カーペットタイルに、生まれ変わらせるような事業を、日本で展開しています。今回ですね、そういった我々の取り組みの一つとして、廃棄漁具の、リサイクルに取り組んでいて、その、取り組みについて、簡単に、説明させていただきます。まずですね、廃棄漁網のリサイクルの、話をさせていただく前に、まず日本において、廃棄漁網が、どのような状況にあるかということに関して、話をさせてください。なかなかこういった数字に触れることはないかと思うんですが、日本における廃棄プラスチックですねの、総排出量は年間約900万トンで、もちろん、もう一度、製品として生まれ変わらせるリサイクルされているそういったものもあるんですが、大半ですね、約、6割7割ぐらいのものは、焼却処分、燃やしているというのが実情です。そういった実情の中で実際地上で使われているゴミが、海洋に、流出しているという数量に関しては、年間数万トンということで、やはりかなりの量がやはり海洋に流出している。ただその流出している、廃棄プラスチックの多くは、豪雨や台風そういった自然災害によって流出するケースが多いというのが、一般的に言われています。で日本に漂着する、プラスチックごみに、関して言うとですね、日本の環境省の調査でいうと、かなりの量がある中でですね、実は、漁網やロープそういった漁具ですね、漁業で使われる、資材が、40% 以上を占めていて、かなり大きな割合になっていると言われています。おそらく皆さんが海ゴミというかですね、海に、捨てられているものということで、例えば飲料のボトルとかビニール袋そういったものを想像されるかと思いますが、もちろんそういったものもかなり漂着ゴミとして、採取されているのは事実ですが、全体のパーセンテージでいうと、10% にも満たない、かなりの部分を、漁網であったり、漁具が占めているというのが実情です。そういった状況の中で、廃漁網ですね、廃棄された漁網をきちんと回収してきて、再資源化、リサイクルすることは、海ゴミの削減にもかなり、効果があると思い、我々としてはこの事業の展開を促進しています。今現状、日本国内ではですね、年間でだいたい6000トンから7000トン程度の漁網が作られていて、もちろん一部は輸出されたりということはあるんですが、基本的には、この6000トン、7000トンという、漁網がですね、日本国内の漁師さんが使っている数量と言えます。で実際漁網が使われているということに関しては皆さんよくご存知かと思うんですけれども、こういった漁網に関しては現状、漁師さんが使われて、いろいろな、漁業関係者と協力しながら、廃漁網として回収してですね、最終的にはやはり廃棄物処理業者、によって、燃やしたり焼却されたり埋め立て処分されます。 処理として、きちんとなされているケースも当然多いんですが、この焼却であったり埋め立て処分というのに対してはかなりコストがかかるということもあって、もちろんその漁の途中で流出したり、実際漁師さんが直接漁網をですね、使えなくなった漁網を海に捨ててしまうというようなケースも実は散見されていて、そういったものが海に流出して、先ほどお話した通り 40% の漂着ゴミになっているというのが実情です。で、我々はですね、今そういった廃棄漁網に対して漁業に携わられている方々と協力して燃やしたり埋め立てたりするのではなくて、廃棄漁網を資源と考えてもう一度プラスチック原料として生まれ変わらせることに取り組んでいます。実際このモデル、このリサイクルモデルによって海ゴミを減らすだけではなくてですね、実際廃棄されている漁網を処理するコスト、燃やしたり埋め立てたりするのにかかるコストを削減することができるということで、漁業に関連されている方にとってはそういったメリットも出てくるということで、比較的積極的に取り組んでくださる漁業関係者の方もおられます。漁網のリサイクルの事例に関してはですね、海外にもいくつか事例があってですね、リサイクルされた材料でいろいろなブランド、プラダであったりバーバリー、そういった有名ブランドにも販売されているようなケースがあります。で、弊社ではですね、イタリア、アクアフィル社という、会社がやっているリサイクルの手法とはまた異なる独自の手法でリサイクルをしていてですね、どちらかというと環境負荷の低い比較的スモールスケールでできるようなリサイクルの技術開発をして、その手法を採用して我々としては漁網のリサイクルに取り組んでいます。なかなかそういったリサイクルの実情に触れることはないかと思うんですけれども、今我々は廃棄漁網、受け入れた漁網をですね、きれいに洗ってもう一度溶かして、造粒という、要は粒状にするんですけれども、粒状にした状態で新たなプラスチック原料として生まれ変わらせています。で、実際にその生まれ変わらせたプラスチック原料自体はですね、自動車の部品であったり、建設の資材、それから農業用資材ということで、さまざまな分野で実際そのリサイクルされたものを使っていただいていると。基本的にはですね、漁網の特性、漁網と一概に言ってもいろいろな材質があったり、いろいろな、漁業によっては異なった網を使うケースも非常に多いので、その漁網の特徴をきちんと理解して、回収状態ですね、汚れ具合であったり、そういった状態も把握をした上で、どういった技術が最適かということを我々としては追求した、結果として事業化しているというところがあるのと同時に、一番のポイントとしてはですね、やはりこの事業をすることによってある程度収益が、得られる、経済合理性に基づいた上で事業自体もですね循環継続していくことができるというのが一番ポイントだと思っています。今現状、日本国内ではですね我々約300トンの漁網を処理していますが、今後ですね数年間で年間2000トン程度、日本で発生しているであろう、捨てられているであろう漁網の約3割から4割を我々がきちんと処理できればなということで、技術開発の進歩であったり事業の拡大を進めているのが今の我々の取り組みです。ありがとうございました。
Kashimura-san. Thank you very much for giving us that rundown of where your business is. I wonder how easy is this to scale? Because of course fishing nets are a big component, or an important component, should I say, of the overall plastics problem. How easy might this be to scale up beyond Japan and into the region, where clearly fishing nets is thrown into the ocean is a pretty big problem?
I just hearing the translation a little wait.
No, of course.
Ya kalau sekarang Pak Menteri sudah nggak bisa lagi karena Pak Menteri sudah nggak ada waktu lagi.
ですね、我々自身のビジネスモデルに関しては、先ほどもお話をした通り、非常に、小規模で、我々のプロセスを、展開することができる。で、基本的には、はい。はい。聞こえてます。聞こえてます。で、我々としてはですね、このビジネスに関しては非常にスモールスケールで展開ができるというところと、基本的に廃棄物、漁網も含めてですけれども、発生する場所に近いところで、処理をするということが、一番重要だと思っていますので、もちろん集約的に、一拠点で集めてきてというのではなくて、どちらかというとですね、漁網が発生するエリアの方々と協力しながら、我々の技術を供与するような形で、その場所、実際廃棄物が発生している場所で、処理できるような、同時に、当然雇用も生むケースもあると思いますし、そういったモデルが我々としては展開することができればなと思っています。実際、日本国内で、今我々一拠点なんですけれども、北の方ですね、北海道の方で、パートナーさんと一緒になってですね、我々としては北海道で発生する、廃棄漁網をそのエリアでリサイクルすることを考えていますし、おっしゃった通り、チャールズさんがおっしゃった通り、海外に関しても同じような、ことが、言えると思っていて、我々の技術を、提供させていただいて、実際廃棄漁網が出る場所で、処理をするような、ビジネスで、もちろん雇用生み、経済合理性に基づいて展開できるようなビジネスモデルを、パートナーさんと一緒に展開していければなと思っています。
Thank you very much, Kashmir-san. Let me just come briefly to the polling results from the first poll, which asked the question, and sorry, it didn't come up on my screen, but it asked the question, how has COVID-19 impacted your ocean sector? Severely, moderately, not so much. And not surprisingly, almost 50% of our respondents said, 48.9% in fact, said severely. 40.4% moderately, so close to 90% of people have experienced both either severe or moderate impacts on their sector, whether it be fisheries, maritime, tourism, energy, and just 9% or just under 10%, should I say, have said not so much. So that was the first poll. I wonder, Louise, could you just introduce the second poll as well? And I'll give everybody just a moment to see that and to answer it. Atsushi, if I can come to you as we begin to close out this discussion, briefly, I wanted to come back to this question of the recovery and the blue recovery as the concept, and particularly as the sustainable ocean economy concept is beginning to take hold in Japan. And it's encouraging, I think, to see that the Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, is part of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. Yes. And being a National Ocean Day today, a good moment for us to discuss this. And I realize this is an enormously complex issue, but are you encouraged by the steps that have been taken by the Japanese government, being a resolutely maritime nation? Are you encouraged by the steps that the Japanese government is taking towards the sustainable ocean economy, or are you still somewhat pessimistic?
Well, that's a tough question, and let me. Am I satisfied with what we are doing here? I guess. Well, I'm hopeful that our government can find a way to show us the path of quick economic recovery from this tremendous impact on our economy in general. And as I remember, after Lehman shock, the OECD had discussed extensively about the green growth strategy. And if I think about how we can come back from the COVID-19 crisis, I would think that the new model for blue recovery would be very important for us to come back to find a way to our recovery. And this is something that we are discussing at the moment in the government as well. But I think some of the efforts that has been introduced by, say, Mr. Kashimura, for instance, that the private sector is really trying hard to lead us in a path of blue recovery, more than I think that the government is really struggling to find a way for any sort of policy that would be able to do it. I think the partnership between government and private sector, therefore, is going to be very important. And I just wanted to highlight quickly the two, or even allude to two things that we haven't really touched much. One is the importance of sustainable and inclusive innovation and the role of ocean science in the path, in a thinking of blue recovery in the context of Asia Pacific. And UN, for instance, are really leading science, technology, innovation for SDGs effort, for instance, that is trying to encourage innovation and science and technology development towards solving the problems of SDGs. And Japan is one of the key countries in leading this effort. And the other thing that we're thinking of is this UNESCO Decade of Ocean Science, which will take place starting next year, which will set the condition for innovation as an engine for blue recovery. And the second point I want to allude to is the blue financing. And this is something that is going to be very important, as we have been talking a lot in the financial sector of ESG investment and whatnot. But now is the blue financing can be a very important tool to really find a way for us to recover in a sustainable blue economy growth model. And we are working very closely with the Asian Development Bank, for instance, to create a sort of the policy for pushing the blue financing to fight our regions to recover from this pandemic. And also, we are collaborating with the Stimson Center in Washington on developing the model for resilience economy, using some of the financing and insurance mechanism to find a way to attract necessary investment for the economic recovery. So back to you, Charles.
Thank you, Atsushi, very much. I just want to, if I can, move across to the ESCAP, to the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, if I may, and just ask a question which has come out, both of what you've been saying, Atsushi, as well as I think what one of our audience members has been asking: how much and in which point are you expecting the scientific sector to contribute to the blue recovery? Executive Secretary, could I ask you to reflect on that? Because, of course, data and science are enormously important, aren't they, in this recovery? Would you see science as being critical, and at what point do we bring science in a major way for this recovery?
Certainly, science is very critical, not only for data, statistics, and ocean accounts that we are working now, and also to support member states. as well as I think science is very important to be able to have these innovations in all fields, depending on which one which issues you would like to tackle, whether on the sustainable maritime connectivity, that I also one of the topic that I mentioned, on the smart port, on the green shipping line and so on. That certainly, the innovation requires science. But if I may, can I relate that with data, statistics, and ocean account? I mentioned earlier that data is very crucial, very crucial. Out of 10 SDG-related indicators for SDG 14, which is ocean-related, only two indicators that are available. That is on marine pollution and marine conservation area. The rest, we do not have good data. So therefore, that is one of the priority. Second, especially for countries such as Pacific states, in which their area is not so much their land area, but their assets, is endowment is actually the vast the sea areas. But exactly how much resources, how much assets that have, of course, they do not know. So therefore, this ocean, the idea of ocean account is also important. But then you need to collect the data, and many of that, much of the data has to come from this so-called exclusive economic zone, which is quite, you need technology and so on. So therefore, this cooperation across countries is also needed. So this is one of priority areas that we are working with member states, and from for example, our pilot countries, including China, including several countries in ASEAN, such as Malaysia, Thailand, and then also Pacifics, where we hope that we can get this ocean account. So if countries have this, then they know, right? The wealth that they have, the assets that they have. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. Can I just follow up earlier conversation around the need for greater transboundary cooperation, and just ask the question that somebody has posed from the audience, and that is, how are transboundary conflicts going to play a role in making the blue recovery more challenging?
Is it to me or to which?
It is to you, Executive Secretary. Yes. Since we were talking earlier about the need for greater level of regional cooperation, how are transboundary conflicts going to play a role in making the blue recovery?
Right. Yes. That is certainly challenging. That is certainly challenging. But let me answer it differently. The strength of regional cooperation or sub-regional cooperation, for that matter, is when we need it to collaborate across countries when there are issues transboundary in nature, for example, that has spillover and so on, or if there are issues that may be difficult, if it is taken up at country level, but you can discuss or collaborate at the sub-regional, regional level across countries. That's one. But then if you have a certain conflict and so on, I have to admit that it's challenging. It's challenging.
Thank you.
I think we need to approach it first by if we have something in common. Some common priorities and so on. So we do not start with something that we do not have in common, right? We have to start with something in common, then we develop the partnership. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. I thought for a moment I thought we had Minister Prabowo back in his chair, but we've lost him again. Can I just come to another question at Sushi that was asked by one of the audience? How important do you think the BBNJ negotiation process at the United Nations is to building ocean resilience and the right conditions for recovery from the pandemic?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. Actually, we have, as our institute, pays very special attention to the process of BBNJ negotiations at the United Nations. And we think it's very important for us to create a kind of cooperative and agreeable regime that it sets the right sort of sustainable rules for developing the area of BBNJ that are being addressed. And I think it is very important to have that agreement ahead of before we really discuss the way to together cooperatively on the development of recovering from this blue recovery discussion, and also the capacity building that are needed to really implement all the agreements that are being done and to the developing states, including small island states. So these are really inclusive and the model for international cooperation. And I hope that the agreement of the BBNJ would give us more opportunities to really cooperate in effort to recover in the blue recovery model.
Thank you, Atsushi. I'm just going to give everybody the poll results from the second poll. What are the most important factors the poll asked in promoting the blue recovery? You can choose more than one of these four choices: supportive policies, available finance, access to technology, and partnerships. And of those supportive policies, 62.1% came out in front of the others. Second were partnerships around the region. This is something that we've been discussing quite a lot during the course of this afternoon's discussion. Available finance, and you mentioned that, Atsushi, blue finance and the need to move more quickly around bringing available finance to sustainable activities and solutions in the ocean. And access to technology, 37.9%. Can I just follow up on that and ask the Executive Secretary from ESCAP, could I just briefly ask you, one of the things that didn't particularly come across in your series of reports was this question of blue finance. We had a focus in the reports on data sharing, on strengthening sustainable maritime shipping, strengthening sustainable fisheries, and ramping up plastic solutions. Executive Secretary, could I ask to what extent are those dependent on having strong financial backing and strong networks of blue finance that enable these important areas to happen? I'm not sure that. I'm wondering if that question didn't quite go across. Well, Atsushi, can I ask you perhaps to just address that? I mean, you've partly addressed it, but I think it's really quite essential that we develop and we build blue finance.
Yes.
Are you confident that that is something that can be done?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not really the question about my confidence on this, but I think the importance of financing is absolutely clear to everyone, and especially when we are talking about blue recovery that are needed to be led by the private sector. So if you think about not only the investment arms of the finance, but also I'm focused more on the insurance aspect of it. After having this, COVID pandemic impacting on the supply chains of global economy, and also the impacted that are being suffering from the natural disasters, especially intense weather changes and due to the climate crisis. I mean, all these things are happening that are really affecting our business private sector. And insurance scheme has to really work out and to incorporate these factors and to really lead both the finance and other business model development into blue recovery. So the two, both blue financing, blue bonds, so on and so forth, but also with the insurance scheme that are really need to be devised and designed so that we'll have the ensure the blue recovery to take place. So,
thank you, Atsushi. We have come to the end of the session, I'm afraid, and I just want to wrap up really by thanking all of our distinguished speakers for coming on today. We've had one or two tiny technical problems. Unfortunately, we were not able to bring the Minister for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries from Indonesia. For some reason, we had a technical glitch there. I do apologize, but otherwise, an interesting discussion. I thank you very much for all of our distinguished speakers and to the audience for listening into this today. A webinar recording will be available on the World Ocean Initiative website early next week. We do have the next webinar in the in the Blue Recovery Series on August the 26th. That is at the same time. That's on science, innovation, and the Blue Recovery. We do sincerely hope you can join us then, and where we'll certainly be digging deeper, I hope, into the Blue Recovery. In the meantime, it just leaves me to thank all of the audience for attending, of course, our speakers, as I just did, and of course, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and indeed the Nippon Foundation for helping to make this happen. Thank you very much indeed. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. And one final thing, our World Ocean Summit is coming again in 2021. So we very much look forward to having you at that. We'll be sending some details around about that shortly. But in the meantime, thank you so much and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.